An article written by Brother Columban in the Beekeeper's Record, a journal of apiculture, from April 906, under the heading Homes of the Honeybee, the Apiaries of our Readers. Introductory remarks. It is, we suppose, not too much to say that the Apiary Illustrated represents the most ancient home of the honeybee in England, or indeed anywhere else that we know of. The venerable abbey, within whose precincts the hives stand, has, we are told, sheltered successive generations of the busy little workers for over 1,000 years, and it is pleasing to see the reverend beekeepers who have charge of the apiary today, clad as their predecessors would be in the far-off days, still carrying on the craft, though the straw skep has perforce given place to the frame hive and modern methods. The figures seen are those of Brother Columban and his colleague, Brother F. Maurus. For the rest, we need make no addition to the following notes, written at our request by Brother Columban. My earliest recollection of bees dates back to my boyhood in Germany, when my uncle, who had some 20 skeps, showed me the bees at work through a small glass window fixed in the skep. I well remember the loft where he used to put them during 3 or 4 months of the severe German winter. During that time the skeps were covered with a kind of carpet, which, although allowing plenty of air, prevented the light from inducing the bees to leave their hives. All this made a deep impression on my young mind, and filled me with admiration for the little labourers, of whom so much loving care was taken. I did not, however, take any practical part in bee work whilst at home. It was only after coming over to England, some 12 years ago, that I got in close touch with the bees, and experienced a mild attack of the complaint known as bee fever. In this venerable place, more than 1,000 years old, known as Buckfast Abbey, as in nearly all monastic houses of ancient times, the bees have always found a shelter. Their produce was highly appreciated, the honey being used for household and medicinal purposes, while the wax was chiefly made into candles, no other material than pure beeswax being allowed to be burnt in the church. But to come over to our times, let me first say my beekeeping began under rather unfavourable circumstances. The bees had been neglected, and during the severe winter the whole lot, 8 stocks, perished outright. Some driven bees were then purchased, but like the rest, they were taken in a poor state when I was appointed to take care of them. The hives and frames were all sizes, and of course not interchangeable. However, I began to read the bee literature, and having profited by its teachings, I secured £400 of surplus honey in my first year. This result was regarded as marvellous, for during the 10 or 12 previous years, the Abbey Apiary had not produced 200 weight of honey in all. I also had some of the best German bee books. It was in them that I noticed the great esteem German beekeepers had for our senior editor, Mr. T. W. Cowan. This made me desirous of knowing something about him, too, when I chanced to come across some old numbers of the BBJ, and also the first edition of the guidebook. Later on, I induced our Reverend Procurator to get the BBJ for me, and to join the Devon BKA. When I had acquired a sufficient store of knowledge with regard to beecraft on modern British methods, I began to put things into shape in our apiary. Until then, we had had the French system, with huge hives, and, as already said, all kinds of frames. Finding the hives were too long, some held 18 frames, I tried the plan of having a nucleus colony at one end of each stock, so that if a queen got lost or came to grief, the other one would be ready to take her place. On this plan, the bees were allowed to communicate by a small hole made in the dummy which divided the 2 lots, and during the honey flow they worked amicably together in the same super, a queen excluder being put over the nucleus. This went on all right for some time, but when the swarming season came, the 2 lots of bees invariably swarmed together. It was most amusing to see the bees rushing out from the 2 doorways, but owing to this fault the plan had to be abandoned, and in order to secure the end in view, I made special hives for nuclei. These hives are divided into 4 parts. each nucleus being on 3 to 4 frames with a feeding chamber below. When these nuclei become overcrowded, all their brood is removed and used for strengthening of the stocks. This latter plan has been successful with me so far. The small lots of bees, being side by side, keep each other warm, and I've been able to winter them safely on so few as 2 frames by feeding entirely on soft candy when the cones contain no stores in the autumn. Though I have been troubled at times with foul brood through the carelessness of neighbours, I claim to have been fairly successful in combating the pest. Seeing that I have never lost a single stock through disease, I now have 32 colonies in charge, all of which worked well in soup as last year, and also a few nuclei. It would take too long to relate the varied experiences that have occurred during my management of our apiary, so I'll only say that it now bears a different aspect from what it was a few years ago. All our hives contain the BBKA standard frames only, which is a great advantage. 3 years ago I was granted a helper in the person of Brother F. Maurus, who spares neither time nor trouble in order to secure the welfare of the bees and comfort of the beekeeper, and to embellish the apiary in general. He has made or repaired nearly all our hives on a system which I think is peculiarly his own, and has devised several ingenious things for ventilation and feeding. Above the frames we use thin boards about 3 inches in breadth. There are 4 or 5 of them on each hive, and I find them more convenient than the usual quilt. The boards not fit close on top bars, there being a 1/4 inch bee space provided by strips of wood nailed on the boards. I have found that after several months it was an easy thing to remove them as on the first day. The bees had not properlised them at all, as they always do the quilts when used. In closing these already too copious notes, I wish all readers a honey season next year, such as will cause us to forget the bad ones of the past.